Imagine, if you will, that all of a sudden something is wrong and that you or someone you love is having trouble with even the simplest tasks. Trying to smile, trying to raise one or both arms, trying to talk or communicate, and it's not working like it's supposed to. What might be happening? Well, you can find out on this edition of Healthy Living, so stay with us. Hello, and welcome to Healthy Living. I'm your host, Tammy Thompson. On this edition of the program, we're going to be talking about the third leading cause of death in the United States and the leading cause of disability and admission into nursing homes. We're going to be talking about stroke. And here to help me do that is Dr. Jacqueline Carter, a neurologist and stroke specialist. Thank you, Dr. Carter, for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, before we get started, I want to know all about you and what brought you to this area.
Well, originally I was born and raised in Alabama. My family's still there. I left there at age 15, went to Massachusetts, finished high school, went to Chicago, did college and medical school, came back south to Vanderbilt for my residency in neurology, and went back to Chicago for about 23 years. 3 years ago, I moved to Milwaukee to start up a stroke program at a 3-hospital system. And because of my mother's illness and failing health, I decided to move back south. So that's how I ended up in Paducah.
Okay, you came back to where it's a little warmer.
Much warmer. I will not miss 119 inches of snow and 42 degrees below zero.
Oh, my lands. Me either. But the humidity here is a little bit different, too.
It is. It is.
So why a passion for education and about strokes?
Well, in my family, there's a history of stroke. When I was a medical student, my grandmother suffered a series of strokes and ultimately died from a stroke. I always had a passion for the brain. Since I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a brain doctor.
Really?
So I've always had a passion for the brain, but at that point, I became very interested in vascular diseases of the brain. I like to teach. I think an educated population takes better care of themselves, and ultimately, I'm trying to put myself out of business. So if I can educate everyone, then I can quit working.
Retire?
Yes.
All right. Well, then help educate us. What is a stroke?
A stroke is a condition that affects the brain. It can be caused most often by a lack of blood flow to the brain. When the blood stops flowing through an artery to the brain, then the brain starts to die, like a ripple on a pond. When you drop a rock into the pond, there's a ripple. So when you put a blood clot into the brain, then the brain immediately around that blood clot dies first. But it continues to die at the rate of about 12 million brain cells a minute. And the longer the clot lasts, then the more brain dies. The other type of stroke, also an interruption of blood supply, but a different manner, not caused by an occlusion of a blood vessel, but a rupture of a blood vessel. And that accounts for about 15% of the strokes that we see. That can be bleeding directly into the brain, or it can be bleeding from a ruptured aneurysm, which causes most of the blood to occur outside the surface of the brain, but still life-threatening.
Okay, so what can cause some of a stroke? You talked about bleeding in the brain, a trauma to the brain?
Well, generally when it's trauma and a blood clot is formed either in the brain or outside the brain, we don't consider that a stroke. Okay. What we're looking at is a sudden interruption of the blood supply to the brain being caused by some other condition. As an example, if you have a blood clot to the brain, it's usually because a blood vessel has gradually narrowed off and a clot has formed because the blood slowed down as it got to that narrowing, couldn't get through, clot formed, and then it stopped all the blood supply to that area. Or we're talking about an episode where the blood vessel, because the walls thin over time, suddenly ruptures, and the blood leaks out that way. And
do blood clots always start in the brain, or do they come from other places?
Well, you can actually have a clot start in other parts of the body, namely the heart, or in the arteries, the major arteries here in the neck, and those can travel up to the brain and cause stroke as well. The brain is, I like to say, is like the mafia. So 25% of all the blood supply that comes from the heart immediately goes to the brain. The brain takes this off the top, doesn't care about what the rest of the body gets, it's getting its 25%. Okay? The rest of the body has to use everything else. So anything that happens in the heart, a clot forms or a clot travels from some other part of the body to the heart, as an example, through a hole in the heart, can travel up to the brain and cause a stroke.
Sometimes they can even start in the extremities, in your
Exactly.
legs, and travel all the way up that way.
Exactly, but that would, normally when you have a clot in the legs, like what we call DVT or phlebitis, the blood clot comes into the right side of the heart and goes to the lung.
Okay.
But there is a condition called PFO, patent foramen ovale, where there's a hole in the heart, and the clot then comes into the right side of the heart, crosses over to the left, and then goes up to the brain and can cause a stroke that way.
And you can be born with that.
You're born with that.
With a
That's
hole
right.
in the
That's a
heart.
congenital abnormality. And most people don't know until they have a stroke.
Right. Well, let's talk about who has strokes. What are the risk factors?
Well, as you said, it's the third leading cause of death, but it's the #1 cause of disability. And as devastating as death is, disability for a lot of people is even more devastating. It's a very expensive disease. The average stroke costs about $86,000 for the patient. And as you know, some of that's going to be handled by insurance, but some of it is lost wages because you need a caregiver at home, or it's money going to a nursing home or some specialist in terms of nursing specialists to help take care of you. So it's a very expensive disease. It affects all ages. Most people don't think that kids can have strokes, but in fact, you can have a stroke in the uterus and
Really?
be born with a stroke. Or you can have a stroke at a young age. Some of the causes for stroke in young people, a common example would be sickle cell. Another example would be congenital heart disease, like this hole in the heart. Or there's another type of hole in the heart called VSD or ASD, and those are seen in children, and they can also cause strokes. Trauma. I had a patient at age 13 who was running with a pencil in her mouth, and she fell. The pencil actually lodged in such a way that it nicked the carotid artery. The carotid artery did what we call dissected, meaning that blood came in between the inside wall and the outside wall, gradually closed that artery off, and she had a very large stroke affecting 2/3 of the brain on one side. So children can have strokes for various reasons. Then we get to the teen years. Birth control pills are added, particularly for females. That increases the risk of stroke. When we look at young adults, we're looking at things like high blood pressure, which oftentimes is not even detected because young people don't generally go to the doctor to get their blood pressure checked.
Right.
Or we're looking at diabetes as being a cause. Drug use certainly increases your likelihood of having a stroke. Alcohol usage can increase your risk of having a stroke. As we get to the middle years, then certainly we're looking at high blood pressure and diabetes and being overweight and being inactive and smoking. All of those things can increase your risk of having a stroke. And as we get older, then of course the risk of stroke increases. So it's much more likely that you would have a stroke at age 85 than at 25, but stroke can occur at all ages.
Even before you're born.
Even before you're born.
And then that can cause some of the birth defects that
Exactly.
that you see and you might not even know that's what caused it. But,
exactly.
well, something that it says, another one of the risk factors is a history of previous TIAs or stroke.
Yes.
What is a TIA?
Well, most people believe that a TIA is nothing big, and I'm here to change that. A TIA is a warning that a stroke is likely to occur. A TIA is what most people call a mini stroke.
Okay.
And even physicians, neurologists such as myself, we sort of brushed this off years ago. But studies have shown that when you have a TIA, your risk of having a stroke soon is greatly increased. And particularly within the first 48 hours after the TIA, you have a very high risk. So now we don't treat a TIA as something minor. We treat it as a stroke that resolved.
On its own?
On its own.
Okay. And so your risks increase significantly if you've had one of those in the first 24 hours, you said?
In the first 48 hours.
48 hours.
And that risk increases or gradually increases over a period of 3 months, then it so slowly recedes. But what we try to do is we try to bring all of those patients in and treat them as if they had a stroke, because we realize that it is indeed a stroke that resolved over a matter of time, generally within an hour.
Okay, so So is it something that I notice here that more in your ethnic background is do some people have more risk?
Sure. The most common ethnic group to have a stroke is the African American population. The African American male, number one, followed by the African American female. Second would be the Hispanic male, followed by the Hispanic female. Third would be the Caucasian male, followed by the Caucasian female. And lastly would be people of Asiatic descent. Always, if you hear what I'm saying, males, males, males are the highest group, irregardless of ethnicity. Now that's true up until about age 65, and then after that it reverts to women. And my theory is that after age 65 all the sick men have died off and left widows, and so now that increases among the women. Right.
Their risk. Is there a reason for that, or is it just the way it is?
In terms of why men or ethnic differences? Well, I think that there are several reasons, and we're still looking at what else may be going on. But let's look at the populations. African Americans and Hispanics have the highest incidence of hypertension. Okay. African Americans and Hispanics have a higher incidence of diabetes. African Americans and Hispanics are more likely to be obese. They're more likely to have a sedentary lifestyle. They're more likely to smoke. And dietary influence. In many communities in the United States, because of how inner cities are set up, there isn't fresh vegetables or fresh fruits available, and what's available around the communities would be fast food chains. McDonald's, Burger King, not that I'm downing them, okay, but people would rely more on fast foods, which are certainly higher in fats, higher in salt, okay? Salt helps to drive the blood pressure. And we know that cholesterol is a problem and fat intake is a problem. So you don't have, in general, a well-balanced diet. Now, interestingly enough, the South has the highest incidence of stroke of any other region in the United States. And I think it's because we have a Southern diet. Mm-hmm. Now, I like everything that I had as a kid, okay? I like greens, I like beans, I like fried pork chops and fried chicken. I like peach cobbler, everything that I had as a kid, but those things aren't necessarily healthy. And what we need to do in the South is to address some of the dietary issues that we have. I came to Paducah and I found out we have barbecue ham. Mm-hmm. Okay, I had it. It's very good. It is. But never before had I heard of barbecuing a ham. It's like a double whammy. You have a smoked meat that's very salty, and then you smoke it again and put something else on it that makes it salty. So there are some things that we can do in our own area to change some of the risk factors, as simple as changing a diet.
Which is easier said than done sometimes,
It
isn't
is.
It is. Well, let's talk about the symptoms. We talked about the risk factors, but I want to know what I'm looking for. What are the symptoms that I should be, or anyone should be looking for when they're trying to figure out if what's happening might be a stroke?
Well, first of all, a stroke is a sudden event. It's not something that usually comes on gradually. It hits you like that, like a bolt of lightning. Sudden onset of weakness. That could be in an arm, a leg, both arms, both legs, facial involvement where the face will droop down, sudden onset of weakness, sudden onset of numbness. This is one of the hardest ones to describe to people, because a lot of people wake up in the middle of the night and they shake their hands because they're numb and they think nothing of it. But sudden onset of numbness, again, half of the face, an arm, a leg, or both sides of the face, both arms or both legs, should tell you that there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. Sudden onset of an inability to communicate. You can't speak, you don't understand what's being said to you, you can't read, or you can't dial a phone, or your speech is slurred, so you talk like this, as opposed to talking in your normal voice. That should raise an alarm. Mm-hmm. Sudden onset of inability to keep your balance, or dizziness. When you try to walk, you stagger like you had 3 martinis and you're not a drinker. If you're dizzy, as an example, room spinning dizziness, if you have that symptom of sudden onset, it would be worthwhile to see a doctor, because that may be indicative of a stroke. Sudden onset of the worst headache that you've ever had in your life. This would be the centennial sign of a rupture of a blood vessel in the brain. So that
we're not talking about an ache, it's, you know, just small headache. It's the worst headache you've ever had.
This is a thunderclapper.
Okay.
Okay? All of a sudden you get this severe, severe headache. In fact, in some people, they will have the headache, pass out, regain consciousness. So any headache that is out of the ordinary, that you would say is the worst headache that I've had in my life, even if you're a migraine sufferer, it would be worthwhile getting that checked out as well.
What about vision?
Sudden loss of vision in one eye, sudden loss of vision in both eyes, double vision, blurred vision, sudden onset again of these symptoms will warrant a visit to the emergency room.
And the word you keep saying is sudden.
Sudden. Sudden.
And all of the ones that you said, the speech, the headache, the blurred vision, those all seem pretty clear. But the one that wouldn't be necessarily would be the numbness, because we want to explain that away. Oh, it's, you know, no big deal. But I mean, it could be that maybe I slept wrong and my hand fell asleep or my foot fell asleep. But what would you say to someone who said, oh, my arm fell asleep, it's no big deal? What would you say?
Well, I would say that we miss a lot of strokes because people say, oh, I'll rub it, or I'll wait till tomorrow to see what happens. And it's still like that tomorrow, and they come in, it was a stroke.
Okay.
Well, if they come in the previous day, there was something that we could have done about it. But now you come in today, we're still going to do something about it, but we're not as effective. The problem with stroke, I think, unlike heart attack, like if I do this, everyone knows I'm having a heart attack.
Right.
If
you're choking.
Everyone knows I'm choking.
Right.
There's no universal sign for stroke. And the reason why is it doesn't hurt. It doesn't stop you from breathing. Most people who have a stroke have no pain. They just have the symptom, the sudden onset, say, of numbness over half of the face. And they'll sit there for hours and rub the face and wonder, why is my lip numb, my face numb? But they won't seek medical attention.
And that's why we're here.
And that's why we're here, because we need to educate the public that if you have any of these symptoms that are sudden in onset, you need to seek medical attention right away. Don't call your friend, don't call your neighbor, don't call your kids. Call 911, get to the hospital, and be evaluated for stroke. Most Americans over the age of 65 can name one symptom of stroke. Only one. Only one. 85% of Americans can't name two symptoms of stroke.
But it doesn't mean they haven't had one.
But it doesn't mean they haven't had one. A lot of Americans don't even realize that a stroke occurs in the brain. They think it occurs in the heart or some other part of the body. But it's a brain disorder, and we should take it with the same seriousness that we take a heart attack. We used to refer to the stroke for about 10 years as a brain attack because we wanted people to associate the word attack with urgency. That didn't take hold. Okay, they still called it a stroke, so we went back to calling it a stroke, but trying to educate people about the urgency of coming in.
It doesn't seem as serious as heart attack when you hear it at first. But when in my research, that's what they still called it, was a brain attack.
Exactly.
Because it's just as critical as a heart attack.
Exactly. And unlike a heart attack, it is the leading cause of permanent disability. A heart attack will strike, you get better. You aren't usually disabled. If you lose the ability to use one arm and leg, or to see out of both eyes, or to understand what's being said to you, you're clearly disabled and unable to fend for yourself. So you're going to need help, therefore, throughout your life. I think if we can convince people of the seriousness of this process, that it is equally as serious as a heart attack, it can be deadly like a heart attack, and most importantly, it is the leading cause of disability, I think most people would come in.
Yes, I do too. We're going to take a break, and we have some good news.
Oh, yes.
We've talked about the seriousness of this and the bad stuff. We have some good news. Stay with us. You're going to want to hear this. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living. I'm talking with Dr. Jacqueline Carter about stroke. And Dr. Carter, thank you again for being here. And in the first segment, you really explained how critical it is to get help and to seek help when you think you've suffered with some of the symptoms of a stroke. For those of us just joining us, please just give the symptoms again of what a stroke is.
Okay.
Of having a stroke, I guess.
If you have sudden onset of weakness, face, arm, leg, either on one side of the body or both sides. Sudden onset of numbness, face, arm, leg, one side of the body, both sides of the body. And it could be either or, the face or the arm or the leg. It doesn't have to be all three.
Right.
Sudden onset of inability to understand what's being said to you, or inability to speak, or inability to read, or inability to write, or talking like this with slurred speech. Sudden onset is important. Sudden onset of inability to maintain one's balance. You stagger like you've had 3 martinis and you're not a drinker. Important. Or you have room spinning dizziness or a sensation of loss of equilibrium. Sudden onset, you need to seek help. Sudden onset of visual changes, loss of vision in one eye, loss of vision in both eyes, double vision or blurred vision, you need to seek help. Lastly, sudden onset of the most severe headache that you've ever had, a thunderclap type headache that comes on out of the blue, you need to seek help.
And like you said in the first segment, it doesn't have to be all of these.
No.
One is enough to seek help.
Exactly.
Before we get in, I teased that we're going to talk about the good news, but I wanted to talk just briefly about that a stroke happens again in the brain.
Yes.
But does it matter where it happens in the brain and as to how it affects these symptoms that you talk about?
It sure does. It sure does. I think of the brain as 2 half loaves of bread,
okay,
with a lollipop stuck up the middle of it. So if you can imagine that, the first loaf, or half loaf, would be on the left side, and we have several lobes of the brain. We have the frontal lobe, right above the ear we have the temporal lobe, in the middle here we have the parietal lobe, and toward the back we have the occipital lobe. Same thing as on the right side of the brain. The left side of your brain is your smart brain. The right side of your brain is your artsy-fartsy side of your brain, your creative side of your brain. The left side of the brain then would be important for things like mathematics, being able to calculate. Okay, some of us have problems with our checkbooks. All right, that's a left brain function.
That's me.
That's me too. Okay, the ability to talk, to understand what's being said to you, to read, to write, that's left brain function. In the majority of the population. The exception would be left-handed people, but most of us are right-handed.
I'm left-handed.
So, oh, you are?
I'm an exception.
You're an exception because then your speech can be on the right side of your brain.
All right.
All right. But in most of us, it's a left-sided function. Things that we do in terms of understanding meanings of words, that's all left brain. On the right side of the brain, and I think is equally as important, the ability to follow a map, okay? I can follow a map, but I still need GPS.
Me too.
All right, so that's my right brain is not too well developed. The ability to paint, okay? I was the only kid in art class that had to use a dime to make a grape. So I'm not artistic at all. My right brain is underdeveloped, but that's a right brain function. Okay. The ability to recognize facial features or to recognize your face and put it with your name, okay, that's a right brain function. Being able to follow music, being able to carry a tune, those are right brain functions. Right. The right and left half of the brain obviously have to communicate in order to get anything done. The right side of your brain controls the left side of your body. The left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So let's say we had a stroke on the left side of the brain. What we would expect to see then would be weakness of the right side, numbness of the right side. We would expect to see an inability to understand language, spoken and written language. Okay. The person would likely be unable to write, depending on the size of the stroke. On the right hand, on the right side of the brain, as an example, The left hand would be weak or numb, or the left side of the body. The person may have slurred speech, but they would be able to understand what's being said.
Okay.
They would be able to read or repeat. But as an example, they couldn't put the numbers on a clock because that's an artistic ability. Or they couldn't draw the petals on a flower.
Okay.
The lollipop is a very important part of the brain. We talked about the two half lobes. They're really big. The lollipop is very small. It's about the size of your thumb. It contains your brain stem.
Okay.
Your brain stem is probably the most important part of your brain because it's the relay station. Everything that you think about has to go from your thought center in the cerebrum down through your brain stem to your body for you to do it.
Okay.
So even though it's very small, it's very important.
There's no relay from the brain to the rest of your body.
No, exactly. So you have to have that relay there in order for things to work. The brain stem, in addition, contains some other things that are very important. In order for us to wake up and go to sleep, there's a part of the brain stem called the reticular activating system that's responsible for that. If that doesn't work, you're comatose.
Wow.
It regulates your temperature. It regulates your blood pressure. It controls your respirations. It controls your heartbeat.
It controls your living.
It controls your living. And then the last part that I didn't mention is like a little almond stuck on the back of the lollipop, and that's called the cerebellum. And that's basically the balance center for the brain. So if I were to create a stroke, I would prefer that you have it on your right side and it be small in the thinking part of the brain rather than in the brain stem or even in the cerebellum.
Right. Well, we said there's good news. All that's scary.
I know.
It's scary.
I know.
So the good news is that there's something called FAST. And it's an easy way to take all of this stuff that you've talked about and make it easy to understand, to help the viewer say, I need help and I need it now. Can you tell me what FAST is?
Sure. FAST. The F is for face. You ask the person to smile.
Simple enough?
If it looks like this, something's wrong.
Okay.
A is for arms. Ask a person to lift their arms. If the arm does this, drifts down, or they can't lift it, that's abnormal.
Okay.
S is for speech. Ask someone to repeat something. Okay? Go Big Blue for Kentucky.
Of course.
If they can't say that, it's something wrong. If it comes out slurred, or they can't repeat it, or they look at you quizzically like they don't understand, there's something wrong. T is the most important element, and that stands for time. Time is important. Every second that we spend not getting treatment for a stroke, more brain cells die. Time equals brain. Time to call 911.
And that's an easy way to remember that. Okay, how much time do you need to get there and get treatment?
Well, see, that's even better news.
Okay.
Probably 10 years ago, we were way behind the curve in terms of treating a stroke. I would say probably 1998, we started to look at what the heart doctors were doing to protect the heart. And we thought, well, if that works in the heart to bust a clot, maybe it'll work in the brain to help us treat stroke. And we started to use a drug called TPA.
Okay.
The cardiologists have been using it for almost 20 years. The neurologists are sort of, oh, well, we've come along lately. And what we found is, after studying this drug on a large group of patients, it could bust the clot, potentially reversing the stroke in about 70% of the patients.
Reversing it entirely.
Reversing it, making it either smaller, much smaller than it would be, or completely obliterating the symptoms. Doesn't mean that you haven't had a stroke.
Right.
But we got the drug in time to break up the clot such that the amount of brain that was lost was smaller than it would be if we had allowed it to continue.
So the symptoms and then the disability that might have come along with that
is minimized.
Is minimized.
Right. Or there's none at all.
Right.
Again, 70% of the patients respond. 30% don't respond well, or they bleed, 6% bleed. Now, bleeding can be very serious in the brain. If it's a large bleed, it's very, very serious. But fortunately, most of the bleeding that we see with TPA is small and localized in the area of the infarct and is generally controllable. That's not always the case, but most times it is. But again, there is a 6% chance that you can bleed.
But it's a better chance than you would have.
Exactly.
Is there a window that this medication needs to be administered?
Yes, it is. 3 hours from the time of onset of symptoms. Now, that sounds real simple, but as an example, you went to bed last night at what time?
11.
Okay. You went to bed at 11 and you woke up at 6, and when you woke up, your right arm just sort of fell down and your leg didn't work, and you were trying to get out of bed and you had to sort of wiggle over, and finally you could pull yourself up, but you couldn't use your arm and leg. What time did your stroke start? Exactly.
No idea.
Exactly. We don't know. So we have to take the time that you were last known well, which was 11 o'clock last night. Well, if you wake up at 6, that's 7 hours. You're not inside the window. Now, that stroke might have really occurred at 5 o'clock, or it might have occurred at 6 o'clock and have been the thing that awakened you, but we don't know actually when it started, so we have to take 11 o'clock. So we have a 3-hour window from the time you were last known well. 3 hours sounds like a lot of time, but you'd be surprised at how much time we just sort of waste away, waiting to see if things are going to get better, calling our girlfriend or calling our kids.
You're not going to believe what happened when I woke up this morning.
Yep, you're not going to believe what happened to me, or I don't know if this is going to get better. What do you think? And we discuss it before we come in. So by the time you get to the hospital, after you spend an hour and a half at home, you get in, we still have to do tests. And the tests take an hour.
Okay, so there's another one going.
So there's another hour that we've lost. So now out of the 3 hours, we might have an hour or a half hour left in order to be able to weigh you, mix the drug, and give the drug. Within that hour that you came in, you would have been seen by the emergency room physician, you would have had a CAT scan, you would have had blood drawn, and you would have been seen by a neurologist to make the decision as to whether or not you're a candidate for the drug.
And sometimes that takes a while.
It takes a while.
To even get to that point.
Exactly. And that's why we need all the time that we can get. So if you have the symptoms, then you need to come in right away. Now let's take the case that I gave for you. And that is that you went to bed at 11, you woke up at 6, and you couldn't use it. We still have an opportunity to do something for you. Intraarterial TPA, giving it into the artery, into the brain, is something that could be done up to 6 hours. But we can't do it in Paducah, but we do it in conjunction with our partner, University of Louisville. So we can send you to Kentucky and still get you treated. Outside of the 6-hour window, there's another procedure where we can go in with a little basket, find the clot, and pull it out. We can do that between 8 and 12 hours. So if we can get you in, make a decision that this is a stroke, we can decide what would work best for you. Why do I mention all of those things? Because at each step along the way, we're decreasing the size of the stroke and increasing the likelihood that you can live your life without significant disability.
Wonderful. So you've gone from 3 hours to 12.
Exactly.
That you have opportunity to maybe reverse the symptoms or at least reduce them significantly.
Exactly.
Well, I was on your website, and there's a place. Some people don't want to come into the doctor necessarily. They suspect maybe they had one of those mini strokes, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on. And you have a place on the Western Baptist website where they can calculate their risk, and we have that website. Tell me a little bit about. They just go on and do what?
It's actually a questionnaire that they will fill out. It asks questions about their overall health, blood pressure. It asks about what symptoms they may have. Questions them about diabetes, family history. Do you smoke?
All of those risk
all
factors.
of those risk factors. And then it helps you calculate out a score so that you can tell, am I at low risk, medium risk, or high risk? I would urge those patients at high risk to get help immediately. Call your doctor, say, I did this little screen on the stroke website at Western Baptist, and I came out high. It's important that if we can find the causes of a stroke before they occur.
Okay.
Meaning we find some blockage in an artery here, or we find blockage in an artery here, or we find a hole in the heart, or we find you have an abnormal heart rhythm called atrial fibrillation. We can intervene before the stroke occurs.
Proactive.
Proactive is always better than reactive. But fortunately, we have treatment for both, but we like being proactive.
So are you saying that if I took this survey or this questionnaire and I tested high, that I should come in and make an appointment and just say, I tested high, I'm wanting to see if maybe I need to be tested further?
Yes.
I mean, even before I've had any of the symptoms we talked about.
Yes.
Because maybe you would do a CAT scan or something along those lines to see if there's even the possibility that there's a blockage there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So that's a real critical thing for people to do. That, I mean, it can save them even before the trouble begins.
Exactly. And we would much rather be proactive than reactive.
Well, I know also if you do get to the point that you had the symptoms that you talked about, Dr. Carter, you have a chest pain and stroke hotline, and we have that number. It's 1-800-575-1911. I'll give that again, 1-800-575-1911. If you had the symptoms that you've discussed in this program, call the hotline.
Call the hotline immediately, and they will advise you to get an ambulance and come in. We need to do that in Western Kentucky because Western Kentucky has the highest incidence and death rate from stroke.
The highest incident in Western Kentucky?
In Western Kentucky, which is one of the reasons why I came, because it's an opportunity begging for a solution. And if we can do what we're supposed to do as a stroke center, we can decrease that mortality, and hopefully we can also decrease the incidence through education, through programs such as what you're providing today.
Wonderful. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about recovery. You talked about one of the myths that people thought initially years ago was that a stroke was in the heart, and it's in the brain, as we've discussed. But another one is that recovery is a couple months and I'm good as new. Is that true? I mean, it's an ongoing thing.
Right. It is an ongoing thing. Most people who have strokes, fortunately, are able to be discharged home. When I say most, I'm talking about somewhere around 60%. That 40%, however, can't be discharged home and either go to a nursing home for a prolonged period of time or a moderate period of time. That can be anywhere from 3 months to permanent. Even the patients who go home, many of those patients will require outpatient support, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, nursing care, a spouse or child at home to help take care of them. Even though they're able to go home, they are oftentimes not completely independent.
But again, the good news is that many people who have watched this show and you've tried to educate them about the signs and symptoms and about getting in that window of coming in and getting the help, they may not need that.
Exactly.
And they may be the ones that get to go home, and it increases their probability of getting to do that.
Go home without significant disability.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter. And we're going to come back in just a moment with two guests, a husband and wife who recognized those symptoms and got to the hospital immediately and had great results. Thank you again, Dr. Carter, for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Healthy Living. I'm your host, Tammy Thompson. If you're just joining us, you noticed in the break that we are talking about strokes, and many of those things that you saw on the screen will help you to know the signs and symptoms that you will be looking for someone you love, or possibly you, to know if you are having a stroke. And in the first two segments, I talked with Dr. Jacqueline Carter, a neurologist and stroke specialist, and she talked about all of those signs and symptoms. So if you missed it, you can join in again on Channel 2, or you can tune to Paducah2.org. That's Paducah2.org. You can click on video, and then you can find Healthy Living in the alphabetical listings of our programs, and you can see it anytime that you wish. Joining me now to give us a a patient perspective, because certainly Dr. Carter is a human, so you know what I'm talking about, but a patient's perspective of how important it is to know about strokes. I have with me Sandra and Talley Holshouser. Thank you for joining me.
Nice to be here.
Thank you. And so, you know, Dr. Carter talked about all the signs and symptoms, and she gave us a physician's perspective. But it's very important to get a patient's perspective and even a caregiver's perspective of how important it is to know the signs and symptoms. So just tell me a little bit about yourselves and what happened to you in regard to a stroke. Talley, what happened?
I was standing in the kitchen making barbecue sauce Wednesday morning. And in the process while I was making it, my arm started tingling. And it just kept tingling. I kept brushing it off. And it got to going on down in my arm. Well, it finally got to where I couldn't bend it.
So tingling, describe
it was just a numbness, like it was asleep.
Okay.
And then it went down in my arm where I couldn't pick it up. And then it kept going on down in my fingers. So I walked over to the wife and told her, and sat on the couch and told her, I said, there's something major going wrong. I said, don't get excited now, but there's something major going wrong here. And so she said, well, I'll call the ambulance. I said, no, just let me get my clothes on. I still have my pajamas on. And I'll get in the car. We'll get in the car and you drive me down there. We can get in there faster when we get time we call an ambulance. So we did, and I went ahead and started getting in the car while she was getting her clothes on. Well, I got to the car, and by that time my leg had completely gone.
So it started up at the top.
Started on my left side, on my left side.
And it just started up in the top.
Right, in the shoulder, all down in my leg.
So it just felt like maybe, you know, how you wake up and you
It just,
felt like
numb
it's asleep.
feeling, it just kept going numb. Well, I got the car door open, I sat down, but I couldn't get myself in. So she come out and turned me around, got me in. And we as the babies probably within 45 minutes or 20 to 45 minutes, something like that.
And of course, you know, when in the graphics that we saw and talked with Dr. Carter, that's the T of FAST. You know, if you have the signs and symptoms, and you know, I'll just go over the FAST again. It's the face trying to smile and one side or the other droops, one or both sides, and you can't smile. And the arms, when one or both arms you can't lift or use, and when it drifts downward. And then your speech, you can't understand what's spoken to you. You can't repeat a simple phrase, or your speech is slurred or odd. So did you have any of the other symptoms other than just...
on your right side get your speech, the left side doesn't.
Okay.
Left side just
Carter.
get your arms and your legs, just like you draw your line right down the center. The whole left side was gone.
Just felt like a weight.
Well, it just wasn't there.
Couldn't feel it.
Couldn't feel it or nothing.
So what did you think, Sandra? You're getting ready to have breakfast. You have him cooking for you.
Well, not actually. We were. I was doing bills, and he was cooking barbecue sauce for the kids before we left.
Okay, so left. You told me before the show you guys sold everything, and
we
just travel in your RV.
And we were getting ready to leave on Friday, and this was Wednesday.
Okay.
So when he told me that, I looked at him and I thought, something ain't right. You know, he's not. Something's wrong. So I said, get your clothes on. We're going to the hospital. So he agreed, and I knew something was wrong then.
Stubborn.
Yeah. So when I got him in the car, finally I pushed him on in and got him in there and buckled him up while I took off. And I started calling kids, you know. And my son-in-law, Jeff Montgomery, met us at the hospital, and he had it all set up for us. And they come out and got him, and I knew it was an angel when I looked at him. I thought, everything's going to be all right now. But so we got in there. Well, they called Dr. Carter, on the way there, he did lose, his face did draw a little bit.
Okay.
And he couldn't, it kind of got slurry.
Okay.
But it went away, that went away. But anyway, when we got in there, Dr. Carter called all the kids in there and explained to them what this medicine would do.
Okay, and what medicine?
It was the TPA.
That she talked about in the first 2 segments.
Right.
Okay.
And she said it could go to his brain and mess him up, or it could cure him. And she wanted us to know it before we did it. Well, the kids and I knew him, and we knew he wouldn't want to be numb on that side, paralyzed. And so we said, let's try it. Well, they did. By that, late that night, he was moving his toes. The next day, he was moving everything.
So it was a progression, a slow of coming back. So did you know, Talley, immediately what was happening? Did you have
I had a pretty good feeling that I'd seen people with strokes and people had gone into strokes, and I knew what it was. It was a stroke.
So you'd seen people with those type of symptoms before, and they had strokes. So what was going through your mind at that time?
I figured I was going to be walking around, holding my arm and dragging my leg. Because I never thought anything like this was in Paducah. And see, it just got in Paducah 1st of August.
Dr. Carter.
Yeah, and the medicine too.
And they have the plan now where they work with, hospitals, and they have a network to where they work together with hospitals in Louisville.
Right.
Stroke to help with that diagnosis and help to treat patients when they don't get there in the timely fashion. So you said that it was 45 minutes
or less
from when you first felt it happening to where you got him in the hospital. And how long before you got, from the time it started to you got the medication?
When we got in the hospital, they started doing CAT scans and all that on me. And I'd say within 2 hours, they was putting the medicine in me.
So you hit the 3-hour window to be able to get the medicine?
I hit the 3-hour window.
They had to weigh him and mix up the medicine according to his weight. And
now there was a gentleman right before me that had it, that turned out like me, and then I was the second one that's had it since it's got to Paducah. And there's one come in after me, a couple days after me, and didn't make it. He didn't get there in time.
Because she had mentioned that sometimes it was very clear when your symptoms began. But she mentioned one scenario in particular, that if you go to sleep and your symptoms start, if you go to sleep at 11 and your stroke happens at midnight and you don't wake up until 7 or 8, well, you're already way into the process, and you don't know it until, and you have to hit that, a window, and it, she talked about all of the, windows of opportunity for medication. So if you missed the first segment, again, you can watch it again on Channel 2 or go to paducah2.org and learn about that.
Right.
So what was going through your mind? I asked Talley what he was thinking. What were you thinking, Sandra?
Well, I knew what kind of person he was. He was energetic, busy all the time, doing something. And I thought, oh my, if he has a stroke, this is going to kill him. And it scared me to death because we're together all the time. And I know everything about him, I know his actions, his thinking, but the only thing I think of is just get him there in time. Maybe they can do something.
And did you know about the fast? Did you have
no? I had no
idea.
No idea. And I even ran red lights to get him there. And
we won't tell him.
I won't tell everybody that. But I did, and I didn't care if they caught me. But I wanted to try to save him, and they did. And I was so thankful. I'm just so thankful for him and for me, because I know what kind of life he would have had to live if he
hadn't gotten the medication in time. And you as well, because then you become a permanent caregiver and have to take care of him. So explain to me how Dr. Carter, what happened and how it began to feel, what happened when you got the medicine. And it didn't work right away, you said.
This was on a Wednesday, about 11 o'clock. And Wednesday night and Thursday morning, I could already tell myself was coming back. And by Friday morning, I was back. My movements, everything was back.
Could you tell at all? Could you feel any difference in before the stroke?
Other than just whenever they'd check me or something, I could tell that I was doing more, that it was coming back faster. I'd say Thursday night about 12 o'clock, it just, I could tell when it just reversed. Something else.
So what would you say to someone, Talley, if, and help to educate people about the importance of knowing what to do, and knowing the symptoms and knowing how to get help in a timely fashion?
If they get any numbness or anything or any tingling or something quits working, don't mess around with it.
Don't mess around.
No, get there as quick as you can.
Even
if it don't turn out to be anything, you'll still be on the safe side.
Okay. Because some people, you even said yourself that at first you're trying to shake it off a little bit, and because you don't want to, first of all, nobody likes to go to the hospital.
No,
he doesn't.
But the way I was standing there at the counter, feeling fine, and had been there for 10 or 15 minutes. And then it started coming on me while I was standing there.
So we talked about all of the symptoms are sudden, a sudden onset. It was just like that, just a drastic change from 1 second to the next.
Right. And then it just kept going on, not ending up.
So I hear that you talk to everyone about this. Tell me a little bit about that, Talley.
People need to know about it.
So what do you tell? What would you tell me if you and I just met, because you do travel all around in your RV?
I just walk up to them. I said, "Well, do I look like I just had a major knockdown stroke?"
No.
In other words, I'm standing there and everything's working, and this has been like 2 or 3 weeks. I'll say 2 weeks ago I had a major stroke, and I tell them about it. That the symptoms, and I need to get there.
See, that's why I think it's so important to have patients, people who have been through whatever topic we're discussing, because if you were to tell me you had a major stroke and it was your carotid artery, because I see that you on your right side.
Here. 9 days. I worked from the stroke to this.
So the stroke happened, and then they cleaned out the artery that was keeping the oxygen.
Days.
9 days.
9 days I was out.
9 days.
Back to normal.
Back to normal.
Yeah.
And that's a word that most people take for granted. Back to just everyday living, things that people take for granted, being able to get up and do for yourself and take care of yourself and do. I mean, that's something that's very, we take it for granted, but it's
That's right.
Well, there's a higher power too.
Yes.
And they were looking over him.
Yes.
And I think that had a lot to do with it.
So how has your life changed today? Because you're back to normal, you said your strength is back. What do you...
I want these doctors to release me where I can get back south.
That's right. Cold weather's coming pretty soon.
We don't like cold weather.
Well, you can just hop in your RV and go on down to Florida and enjoy it for a while. And so what is your prognosis now? What do the doctors say about how you need to take care of yourself now?
Well, I haven't talked to Dr. Carter right now, but all the rest of them has released me to on normal stuff.
Said he's doing fine.
Said you're doing fine?
Yep, doing fine.
But do you have a keen awareness now of, okay, if there's even the slightest thing, I'm going to the doctor. I'm going to find out and make sure that it's not happening again.
And I watch him.
Like a hawk.
I do.
Right.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining me. I really appreciate it. And Talley, I'm so glad you're doing so well, and I'm so glad that you had the presence of mind to get to the hospital in that timely fashion so you could get that.
Don't stop and think. Do it.
Don't stop and think. Would that be the last advice you would give? Don't stop, just go.
Just go.
Just go.
Because I've seen a lot of people out there, that like that. That's what they have to put up with. It's not, in other words, instead of 9 days, you're down for the rest of your life.
Do you have to have any physical therapy anymore?
No physical therapy.
See, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful, because if you can get there within the 3-hour window, I mean, you don't have to have any, you're just like before.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And probably better, because now, like we said, you are aware, and now you share all of that with anyone that will listen.
Right.
To help, maybe
he
they
does too.
Have the same great results. Thank you so much, and I'm so glad.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Healthy Living. Again, we've been talking about strokes. We're going to leave you again with a quick reference of the signs and symptoms and how you can help yourself or someone you love to know what to do if you have the sudden onset of these symptoms that you might be having a stroke, to know what to do. Join us again on Healthy Living. I'll see you next time.